Morning, it's March 29th, 2026. In Boston, Massachusetts, Lady Gaga's in town. The Mayhem Wall has come to town. She's very cute. Anyway, as I'm walking to St. Francis House, where you use a clarity card to get inside. It's pretty ironic considering what happens in there these days. Which is anything but clear. I'm going to try to clarify another sense of some of the teachings of Jesus. So, the parable of the weeds is one of my favorites. In that parable, in Matthew, Christ says, a man goes out, plants good seeds in his field. Later, an enemy comes along, plants seeds that sprout weeds, choke the plants, and the workers in the field say, should we take the weeds out? The planter says, the master of the field says, no, wait until the harvest. At that time the reapers or the angels will come along and separate the weeds from the wheat, and the weeds will get burned up. So if you think about the New Testament, or the Bible itself, but the New Testament, you have the four Gospels, which is the life of Jesus, the Acts of the Apostles, which is a little bit of the life of Jesus after he rose from the dead, and then what some of the apostles did in the immediate aftermath. You have Revelation, which is, I'm not going to describe what it is, but it's a revelation. So that's 6 books. And then you have a bunch of letters written by various people. And if you go back to the book of Genesis, it took 6 days for God to create the world. 6 days. And if you think about a hexagram in the I Ching, there are 6 lines, each of which is either male or female. When Jesus chose apostles, he chose 12. So if you take the hexagram for receptive in the I Ching, it's 6 female lines. It's 6 broken lines. So each line has a line segment, a space, followed by another line segment. So there are 12 line segments altogether. Those are the 12 apostles. The receptive. So there are 6 books in the New Testament which are fully receptive. They are not, in the sense that they are not themselves creative. The author of those books was not being creative in such a way as to obscure what Christ had said or done, in the same way that happens in those letters. If you think about the parable of the weeds are burned up. So you've got Gospels, Acts of the Apostles, Revelation, 6, and then a bunch of letters, which can be burned. Letters written on paper, dead trees, like a cross. So you have Jesus himself, the person, what he said and what he did, and then he's pinned to a cross. Pinning someone to a cross is like, this is the shape that you should be in. If you think about all the positions that Jesus' body could be put into, he could be sitting, he could be lying down, he could be standing, his arms could be at the side, could be on top of his head, could be wiping his butt. The cross is about pinning someone to a specific definition that someone else has decided they should adhere to. It is a form of judgment, obviously. Saying, okay, I look at you and this is the shape that I, in my godlike wisdom, have decided you should be in. I have made the decision that only God should make, that you should be in this position and fixed in this position. Because it's simpler for me if I can define you according to my specifications and inhibit your freedom and your growth. If you think about Jesus as a flower, his growth is inhibited by the weed that is the cross. He is not able to grow freely. He does not have the liberty and the environment in which to thrive and bloom into what God intended him to be. He is instead being judged by human standards and pinned to a cross. And the letters that are written by various people are the only sources in the New Testament where one can find any justification for lots of judgmental things, lots of the role of women, for example, and some of the things that Paul says. There are just a lot of the unpleasantness that can be derived from an incorrect interpretation of Jesus' teachings come from those letters, not from the Gospels. Nothing in those letters is living Jesus. Those are letters. They are, being written to specific groups of people, and they the biases and the cognitive habits and tendencies and distortions that the authors of the letters suffer from are on display in those letters. That is not to say that they are to entirely be dismissed, but in the same sense as, a flower is a plant that's growing, or wheat in the parable of the weeds, it's a plant that's growing that people want to be growing where it's growing, and it's helpful and beneficial. A weed is not. And it is not to say that everything in those letters is deleterious or harmful or a distortion, but they are different. They have been, they are to be separated by your better angels. The reapers or angels in the parable of the weeds are your better angels. And if people just try to find some misogynist topic as an example and look online for which New Testament scripture quotes are used to buttress those arguments, it is inevitably from those letters. You won't find it in what Jesus said. Another thing you won't find is Jesus claiming that he died as a scapegoat to absolve the world of its sins. That is another thing that arose in those letters. You can understand a group of people who let a friend suffer horribly, publicly, in a humiliating way, and die, might have a psychological motivation for restructuring the narrative so that it told a different story with some elements of truth in it, but with lies that make them feel better. So that's another example of how the parable of the weeds can be read. You can view the New Testament as a garden or field, and you have the 6 days of creation, a hexagram, or a hexagon if you think about a bee pollinating and creating something sweet, honey. It's a 6-sided shape. There are 6 books that are different than the other books in the New Testament. And the fact that what happens to the weeds once they are separated from the good stuff, from the seeds planted by the Son of Man, the fact that they burn And the fact that letters can burn, just picture all those letters burning. And it's not necessarily a judgment, but nothing in those letters is necessary. It can be supplementary, it can be supportive of things that have been said elsewhere, but nothing in any of those letters is necessary. Only those 6 books, the 6 days of creation. That was the intent all along. It's how I am.